looking to throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. He leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26, heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is gonna take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Anthony Pagnotta here for a second straight night. The Heel Tough Blog podcast is live as we get you prepared for Carolina's game against Virginia. Look, I know some of you guys probably are locked in, getting ready to watch the World Series. Well, I'm a Mets fan, so I don't really care. I hate both teams passionately. So let's talk a little Tar Heel football. I know that's probably not the most exciting thing to do, especially this year. But hey, man, Carolina's coming off a bye. They're getting ready to renew the South's oldest rivalry against the Virginia Cavaliers. And so there is a lot to talk about tonight on this edition of the podcast. And then earlier this afternoon, an article comes out from On3 Sports. Pete Thamel with some interesting comments on the job that could become open at Carolina at the end of the season. This is something that I don't know if anybody would have predicted he would say about this job, comparing it to an SEC job. So we'll talk a little bit about that before we get out of here for this edition of the podcast. But you see Josh Marlowe alongside of me here once again after last night, just ran through the recruiting stuff and the look ahead to the second half of the season. So really, I want to focus on that last part there. When you look at the second half of this season, what are some of the most important things that you're wanting to see? I gave 5 of them. I'm not expecting you to give 5. But just off the top of your head, what are some of the most important things that you want to see from Carolina here in the second half of this 2024 season? Looks like your mic is not working, potentially. Not sure what exactly is going on there. You're unmuted, but we'll have to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that I was talking about last night was really just, especially at quarterback, wanting to see Jacoby Criswell become, the quarterback that we know we can trust moving forward into next year. Amari and Hampton, want to see him finish off this special season. I think that's really what we're looking for. I think one of the other big things is, make a bowl game. That's really the most important thing, I think, in my mind, because when you look at the schedule, it is manageable enough to make a bowl game. Let's see if we got Josh with us here. Give it another try, buddy. What you looking forward to in the second half of this year?
All right, you got me?
Yeah, we got you. We got you.
I think more than anything, it's just playing with some pride. Expectations to win, not very high. I think winning a bowl game or making a bowl game, I think, really depends on what happens this weekend. If Carolina can get back to 400 to 500, maybe they put themselves in a position to steal 2 more wins down the rest of the way. The most important thing is play with some pride, play for yourselves, and really play for your coach. because it feels like this is the end. And I think emotionally he just needs a pick me up because we know how hard he took the loss of Tylee Craft. Um, as and this, and Tylee Craft wasn't, Vince Young or wasn't an all-time great player, but it shows you the impact that he had on Mac Brown, where just visibly overcome with emotion multiple times this year talking about him. And Mac Brown deserves to go out with a group that played for him, not a group that quit on him. And so for me, that's the most important thing. I'd love to steal wins against rivals like Virginia this week. You got Wake Forest later bit down the season, of course, NC State. But more than anything, just become a team that the last 5 games we could say that we were proud that we invested our time in them, and not one that when the game comes to an end, we're glad it's over so we can enjoy the rest of our college football Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice, but it's been tough sledding so far this year. When you look at this Virginia team that comes in here, this isn't the Virginia team of the last couple of years that Carolina, won against in 2022, and then somehow found a way to lose to in 2023. So, I mean, this is a team that is much better than a year ago. They're 4-3. Now, look, this is not the toughest, team left on your schedule in terms of, who they've played. I mean, look, the games that they've won, they've won at home against Boston College. That's a pretty significant win. On the road at Wake Forest, probably their second most significant win. But that was early season Wake Forest, too. That was still struggling through some things. This is a team that is still pretty solid, but I don't really know if we know just how good this team is. Now, I will say they nearly found a way to beat Louisville a couple of weeks ago. So they're going to come in here ready to fight. And we've always talked about it. And I know that people have made fun of us before, mainly the guys on the morning show at WFNZ, with me saying that this is a legitimate rivalry. Well, Virginia thinks of it like that. Carolina really hasn't. And you look, Carolina had a stretch of just a ton of success against Virginia, but going to Charlottesville was always difficult. Now you're in a stretch where Virginia has beaten you 5 out of the last 7 times. So what you said, I think just showing fight, this is the first real test of that, because this is a team that hates you about as much as anybody else on their schedule that's not named Virginia Tech. And they play like it every time that you face them. So Carolina's got to be prepared for a fight. And once again, it's a 12 o'clock game. So I don't really know how much we can expect that in this one.
Yeah, this most definitely is a rivalry. It's one that, yes, means more to Virginia than it does to Carolina. Unfortunately, it feels like that's all the rivalry games that the Heels play on the football side of their program. Yes, I got made fun of this morning for talking about it. And let's just be pretty frank. Mac supports a team that loses every rivalry game every year in Penn State because they can't win big games, and bone pools for too many teams to keep up with the amount of rivalry games just to keep up with every year. So
fair point.
It's very hard for them to invest in singular rivalry games. And so, I look at this game as one that, last year, this is what saved Tony Elliott his job pretty much. And it's what kind of started building them to whatever they've built to, which I don't know what that is, but they were down by 1 score in the second half at Clemson last week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, that final score was a 3-possession ball game, but it was 17-10 with 8 minutes to go in the third quarter. So this program, since they upset Carolina a year ago, has come a long way. And while, Drake May isn't here to avenge that, a guy like Omarion Hampton is back. A guy like Kamen Rucker and Power Eccles, these guys were back that, were a part of that loss that derailed what was once again another promising season in Chapel Hill. And that should motivate you to go on the road into an environment that will not be overly crazy. There's an argument to be made that there will be just as many Carolina fans in that stadium as there will be Virginia fans. Like, you shouldn't be intimidated by the environment. And at some point, you should want to get revenge for teams ruining what were special seasons. And you've had a week off. You're as healthy as you've been since the start of the year. It's your first time playing on the field since you knew you lost your teammate in Tylee Craft. That should serve as some sort of motivation to go out there and get a win for him and his family. So I don't care if this game's kicking off at noon. I don't care if this game is on the CW. There is no reason for Carolina to not come out and ready to play. You've had 2 weeks to get ready for this game. And so whether Carolina wins or loses, the most important thing is that they look like a team prepared to play right away, something they weren't the last 4 weeks before the bye week.
Yeah, and look, fighting for your fallen teammate, I think, is one of the rallying cries of this team. It should be. That should be what everybody is really focused on, is giving your best effort, because you know that Ty Lee would have been giving his best effort if he could be out there. So I hope that's the mindset that these guys are going to take. I know that there are a lot of guys, especially the wide receiver room. You heard during the week, J.J. Jones spoke to the media, and, he was told by September Kraft, I want you to score today. Do it for my son. And he did. I think the wide receiver room is going to take that personally. And every guy that gets the chance to wear that jersey, which if we listen to what JJ said the other day, he believes it's going to be Kobe Paysour. This could be Kobe's big game. He's starting to feel healthy. So I really think that this team will hopefully embody that mindset the rest of the season. That's what you've got to do. And really quickly, shout out to Virginia for honoring Ty Lee as well, putting the stickers on their helmet. Wouldn't expect anything less, especially after everything that their university went through, and even to this day is still going through, trying to recover from 3 of their players dying, due to a school shooting. Like, I mean, it's unimaginable. And I think them paying tribute to Ty Lee is something special, and we really do appreciate that. But, going back to the game, you look at this Virginia team. This is a really solid team. Now, if you look at the statistics, it's not going to blow anyone away. They're a team that's averaging 28 points per game offensively, which is only 72nd in the country. But it's still a dynamic passing offense, a team that's averaging 262.7 yards through the air. Really good rushing offense as well, 159.6 rushing yards per game, 422.3 yards of total offense. So a team that in just about every one of those categories ranks in the top half and really in the top quarter of the country in all of those statistical categories. They're really led by Anthony Calandria. This year, this is his job. Remember last year, Tony Muskett came in, beat Carolina. Luckily, you don't have to worry about him, but you've got a guy that's more talented than him. And in his sophomore year, you're seeing him take better care of the football. Now, don't get it wrong. He still has those gunslinger tendencies, and that's one thing that Carolina will hope to bring out of him. But he's completed 63.6% of his passes for 1,649 yards, 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Then you got Kobe Pace and Xavier Brown in the backfield. Both guys 366 yards so far this year, 4.5 yards per carry for Pace, a little more of a grinder type back. And then you've got Xavier Brown, who's the more explosive guy, 7.2 yards per carry so far this year. Pace, one of the things you're going to have to do with him, not anywhere near on the level that Desmond Reed was at out of Pittsburgh when you face them, but a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. 14 catches, 148 yards so far this year. So Carolina's got to be aware of that in this matchup. At wide receiver, really, really talented guy on the outside in Malachi Fields, a guy that a lot of people sort of toyed with preseason All-ACC recognition. 40 catches, 606 yards, 4 touchdowns, on pace to reach that 1,000-yard mark. Opposite of him, you've got another guy who's had some big play moments for them in Trell Harris, 13 catches, averaging 15.5 yards per catch, and has found the end zone twice. And they've got one of the better tight ends that Carolina is going to face. This is really going to test the linebacking core that's struggling at times in coverage. 22 catches, 283 yards and 2 touchdowns for tight end Tyler Neville. Their biggest weakness, honestly, is their offensive line. This is a group that is not grading out well by any stretch. they have allowed a ton of pressure so far this year. 3 guys amongst their starters that have allowed at least 10 pressures so far this year. And the bigger issue for them is they have taken 24 offensive penalties this year. 17 of them have been on their offensive line. So when you look at this offense, what kind of challenge do they present to this Tar Heel defense, especially with something that I didn't even mention, Calandria, a guy that can also run with the football, very similar to what we saw from Haynes King the last time this team was out there.
Yeah, Carolina's given up 75 yards rushing or more to the quarterback, I think, in 3 straight games. They got to be aware of that tomorrow afternoon. I think Virginia's offense isn't over-the-top explosive, but they have playmakers. And they have guys that are capable of making plays. And so Carolina's got to basically account for everybody that's in, that's on the field. This isn't something where you could take your eye off of one guy or this guy and then not kill you. No, they move the ball around, and they use everybody that's on the field. On the flip side, though, this is an offensive line that is suspect. And so if your defensive line can play with some sort of a pulse, if you can get a consistent pass rush from Kamen Rucker, if Jahvaree Ritzie looks like the guy you saw the first 3 weeks of the year, if Des Evans is not making the initial play but making the play that makes the play, then there's a chance for this defense to not be as exposed as it's been in the weeks leading up to the bye week. And so it's going to really come down to the game plan, the confidence of the guys, and the execution of what they're being asked to do. But look, this isn't an offense that I think should score 35 plus points on Carolina's defense, but they're more than capable of doing it if we've seen the same type of defensive effort, the same type of defensive mistakes we saw leading into the bye week the last couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, they've had some moments where they've shown that they are a dynamic offense, and they've got playmakers. You look at the running game. That's what scares me the most about this group, honestly. You've got 2 different running backs that are having really solid seasons, including one that can do damage out of the backfield as a receiver. We've seen that hurt Carolina so far this year. And then you've got a quarterback that's mobile. To me, you have to find a way to get him on the ground. If you don't, then you're going to be in trouble in this game. They're going to be able to move it on you relatively easy. You move over to the other side of the ball, and this Virginia defense, it's really not a great unit, but it's one that, was competing in the first half against Clemson, didn't allow big plays until the second half, still allowing 25.7 points per game, which is 79th. Now, that is significantly better than Carolina, who's averaging 30.4. So, there are a lot of really bad defenses in college football this year. This group, a little more close to the average. Now, the thing is, they do allow a ton of yards, especially through the air. 272.6 passing yards allowed per game, 133.4 rushing yards, and 406 total yards. So they're a group that, similar to Carolina, can't be feeling great necessarily about where they're at. The strength of this unit is the secondary. Their 2 safeties are about as good as you're going to find in this conference, with Jonas Sanker and Antonio Cleary. Both guys are having spectacular seasons. The biggest issue is that the rest of their secondary is really struggling. You look at, Corey Thomas Jr., a guy who in the slot has allowed over 240 yards receiving. The biggest concern for them is their outside corner, Jam Jackson, who has allowed 490 receiving yards so far this year. That is the second most of anyone in college football this year. So that's an area that Carolina should be able to attack, whether it's with J.J. Jones, Kobe Paysour, who they're listing right now as their starter on the outside opposite of Jones, or back in the fold this week, Christian Hamilton. That could be huge for Carolina in this game, with a corner that has given up a ton of yards and a lot of explosive plays. You look at the strength of this unit is very clearly their pass rushers. You've got Chico Bennett Jr., who was supposed to be the star of this group coming in, Hasn't been nearly as good as I think a lot of people thought he was going to be, but still 22 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, which is the most on the team. And he does have a sack. He's getting pressure on the quarterback too. So far, 18 quarterback pressures this year. Now, the guy opposite of him, Cam Butler, is probably the better pass rusher right now of the two. Now, he's only got 2 tackles for loss and only 2 sacks, but he's got 21 quarterback pressures so far this year. And we've seen when Jacoby Criswell has been under pressure, that has hurt him. Linebacker spot, you've got one guy that's really having a strong season in Cam Robinson, 39 total tackles for him, 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks so far this year, but a guy that's also been able to get pressure whenever he wants to and tackling relatively well. But the guy next to him is struggling a little bit in Cam Jackson. So this is certainly an opportunity against a group that is not necessarily the strongest to potentially be able to put up some points and turn this into a little bit of a track meet.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Virginia does defensively is what we asked Carolina to do defensively. Give up a lot of yards, don't give up a lot of points. Like imagine if Carolina was giving up 25 points per game, how different this season would be and how different virtually every season for the last decade would be. Which is mind-boggling because 25 points still feels like a lot, but in college football, you play routinely every game. It feels like in the low to upper 30s. So they're a bend but don't break defense. But with some of their question marks at corner, you have some abilities to make some big plays in the passing game. Something that Carolina is going to have to do to win, but you want to set that up by being able to run the football, move their defensive line, wear down their defensive line, and really take them out of a situation where we're living in 3rd and 6 and they're blitzing more guys than we can block. That's really what's been the downfall for Carolina the last couple of weeks is even though they've played games out on the final score look close, Carolina's living in 3rd and long and they can't block it. And Jacoby Criswell, like Drake May and Sam Howell would have handled the pressure that that he's seen better because they're just better quarterbacks. But they would have made some of the same mistakes that Jacoby has made the last couple of weeks. And that's going to be the thing for Carolina. Can you stay on schedule? Can you stay ahead of the chains and really take advantage of what this defense is going to give you as opposed to what's happened the last couple of weeks where you're living in 3rd and 5 and longer and these defenses are putting their ears back and coming after a quarterback that does not have an offensive line capable enough of protecting him no matter how many blitzers are thrown his way.
Yeah, you look at the special teams for this Virginia group, pretty solid group. One of the better kickers right now in the league in Will Bettridge. He's made 14 of his 16 field goal attempts so far this year. Daniel Sparks averaging 44.3 yards per punt, one of the better numbers in the league. So very solid guy right there. And their kick returner and punt returner in good shape with Chris Tyree handling the kick return duties and Evan Davies handling the punt returner duties. Let's go right back to the quarterback because I think when you start talking about the Tar Heel storylines for this game, Jacoby Criswell is coming off his best performance of his career. I know you could go back to that game against James Madison, but James Madison wasn't necessarily pressuring him. That game against Georgia Tech, there was a legitimate chance down the stretch Carolina could win that game. And you saw a different quarterback in Jacoby Criswell in that second half. I thought once he started running the football, taking off and running when he didn't have certain reads, because there still weren't really any design runs in there, which we have blasted Chip Lindsey for not having that in there since he has taken over the starting job. But you saw once he was able to start using his legs, that opened a lot of other things up. It opens up so much in that short and intermediate passing game, which is where he's really thriving right now. I know he's got the arm strength, but the accuracy isn't there with the deep throw. So you've got to make your hay in those short and intermediate areas. And I think him running the football allowed him to do that. Now it's about taking that next step. And what does that really look like in this game against Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. I guess it's more about, I mean, because like the numbers are there, and I feel like he's given Carolina a chance every week to win, all things considered. And we did against Georgia Tech. I mean, what Carolina was down 2 possessions, and he got them and got them in a position to get to overtime. And I think if Carolina gets that game to overtime, I think Carolina wins the ball game. And so I mean, I think really for Jacoby Criswell, the next step is doing what you're doing, but get rewarded with it in a win, and just feeling confident in what you're doing. Because I don't think, and look, what happened against James Madison was just a comedy of errors that snowballed on both sides of the ball. But outside of that, I think there hasn't been a game where I've looked at Carolina in a losing effort and said he was the biggest reason why, right?
Mhm.
Like even the Duke game where you were up 20 to nothing and you end up getting beat or whatever. I mean, Duke just started sending almost 8 guys at you routinely. How many quarterbacks are going to be able to withstand that over the course of 60 minutes? So I've been pleased with what he's done. I feel like he's been rewarded with what he's done. So, maybe getting a little bit more consistent on the intermediate throws, because those seem to really plague him when they try to throw, wide or to, those 7 to 12 to 15 yard routes. Outside of that, man, it's just keep doing what you're doing, but get rewarded with that with the win. Because I think if he would have added a win or two in the last couple of weeks, his confidence would be the highest it's been during his time at Carolina and at Arkansas combined.
Yeah, I mean, one of the toughest things to do is to try to tell a dude that hasn't won a game so far this year as a starter that you're doing the right things and you're making progress. I mean, you could show it to him on film, but when you're not getting a win, it's really hard to, to try to keep selling that to him. So, yeah, you're right. Now, what sucks is that you got to rely on the rest of your guys to actually pick you up. I mean, last week, even if you, or 2 weeks ago, rather, if you complete that pass to John Copenhaver, it doesn't matter because your defense still lets up a 68-yard rushing touchdown and you end up losing the game. So honestly, it's almost better that that completion didn't happen because it would have hurt even worse. For me, I think the area that you want to see him get better, it's really just a team thing, but this team has to find ways to put the ball in the end zone. When you get to the red zone, it has to be touchdowns because you're seeing this team have to go for it on fourth down way too often. You're seeing them have to settle for field goals way too often. And when points are at a premium, when you need points every possession that you can possibly get them because your defense just is not ready for the task, then those hurt you. So you have to find a way, I think, moving forward to put it into the end zone. And now it's going to become even trickier because the next storyline is how in the world do you replace what Bryson Nesbitt brought to you? Most targeted receiver on the team, tied for the lead in touchdowns, and led the team in receptions. Now you've got to figure out a way to replace his production. Christian Hamilton coming back certainly will help, but this is a group now at wide receiver that has to step up, and now you need John Copenhaver to be the guy moving forward in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I have stressed the development and the usage of that tight end room, because Bryson Nesbitt's a talented football player. He also gets nicked up, and this is kind of just part of what it is with him. And so you need Copenhaver to be the guy. You need Jake Johnson to show up and provide something. The issue is this puts the onus on a wide receiving room that has not taken that step that I think we thought they were going to take, because that's not an area that I look at on this roster and question the talent. Other areas I'll look at no matter what the recruiting ranking says, and I'll tell you that guy isn't as good as we think he is. I don't think that when I think about these wide receivers. I think they're every bit as good as we were told they were when they came out of high school, and what we've been told since they've gotten into the program. Hasn't translated onto the playing field necessarily this year, but when you've had to play 3 different quarterbacks, it is going to take some time. So the hope is that you've had 2 weeks off to really maybe figure out some things, try some different guys. I do think Chip Lindsey could do a better job putting these guys in a better situation to be successful. And maybe, that's what happens where we quit asking them to do so much and ask them to do what they're capable of doing. And really just try to get the most out of where they are right now in their development. And so it's going to be tricky. I think you'd want to see Carolina want to run the football more. But if this team's going to compete for a bowl game, you're going to need guys like Christian Hamilton and some others to really take steps forward these last 5 games of the regular season. And that starts tomorrow at Virginia.
Yeah, Panther Millie says, in response to the struggles of the wide receivers, that's coaching. I got to be honest. Lonnie Galloway is the last guy that I'm questioning on this staff. Because when you put a receiver into the league every single year that you've been at Carolina, clearly you know what you're doing. When you've got a guy like J.J. Jones, who's got all the talent in the world, but he still has drop issues, how's that coaching? When you've got a guy in Christian Hamilton who has flashed, but he fumbles the ball early in the game against James Madison and puts you behind early in the game, how's that on coaching? Like, this is a group that I just, there's no way to me that you're looking at what this group is doing right now and you're just saying it's coaching. I think that it's guys that maybe necessarily aren't up to the role that they're in right now. But hey, here's the thing. Mac Brown said, and I don't know what Jordan Shipp was dealing with. He said that he's fully healthy and you should expect to see him more moving forward. So,
well, and let me clarify. To me, I'm not complaining about Galloway's coaching. I'm complaining more about the position that Chip Lindsey has put these guys in.
Well, no, that's a great point. And that's the next storyline that I think needs to be brought up. Is Chip Lindsey going to put this offense in a position to succeed? Because here's the thing. I said earlier, this team has to score when they get in the red zone. Well, you know how it would be easier to score when you get in the red zone? If you actually run the football when you're in the red zone. You've got a guy right now in Jacoby Criswell who is a mobile quarterback. You can use him in those ways. Why are you not? I don't understand why they have not used that element, especially in the red zone, where this team is struggling to finish drives with touchdowns. You have to be able to run the ball. You can't just hand it straight off to Amari and Hampton every time and say, find a lane and find a way to get us into the end zone. But when you have been able to effectively run the ball down there, it's led to a lot of success. I think Chip Lindsey has to figure out how he can get this team into the end zone, because if he can't figure it out, it's not going to be on these players to have it happen. Because the thing is, this is not an explosive offense like in years past, where you were hitting a lot of these big plays throughout the game where you didn't have to worry if this team wasn't finishing in the red zone. This is a team that methodically moves the ball up and down the field. And right now, their offensive coordinator is simply not getting the job done in between the 20s or inside the 20s.
I think, yes, it's easy to be frustrated with them not running Jacoby Criswell. I think it's a sign of them telling you they want to keep him as healthy as possible, because they're not confident if they had to put Connor Harrell back in the game because of an injury situation that they could win with him.
Okay, I get that. Here's my counter to that. So you would rather be safe with your quarterback but not win. What's that going to do for his confidence?
Well, I mean, that's a great point, but I mean, the object is to put yourself in a position to win the game. I think not running Jacoby Criswell, they've still been there. Whereas if you run him, he takes a hit, he gets hurt. What's happening with Connor Harrell? We're probably talking about blowout city the rest of the season, because that guy clearly regressed after what we saw from him last year in the bowl game. Nonetheless, though, you still got to find a way to put the ball in the end zone. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of hard to defend how they handled the end of regulation against Georgia Tech, where your best player didn't touch the football inside the 10. You clearly played for the field goal in that situation.
Well, yes and no. The throw that he made to Copenhagen was not playing for the field goal. That is a guy that it's a lack of execution. Your guy dropped the ball.
Yes, but when you look at the totality of the play calling, they were playing for overtime, which didn't make sense. You're at home. Most times you play to win the game in that situation, especially where this team knows they're not going anywhere in terms of ACC title game or anything like that. They needed that win to really open up the path for them to a bowl game. So, I mean, I feel like for the most part, Chip Lindsey has done his job giving this team a chance to win. But the issue has been the same issue as the issue that we've had every year. He is now in the situation where he has to chase points. 3 isn't enough. It's not. I mean, you've got to score 35 every week to really feel confident that you have a chance to win moving forward. And I don't think this offense is built to do that this year. And so that really, which is why there's more of an onus to convert on the red zone opportunities when you get inside the red zone. But nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see. I think, if Carolina's in the situation that they were against Georgia Tech this week, I think you see different play calling. I think he manages the situation a lot differently, and that's the hope. Like we talk about the players improving from week to week. I think one thing we can complain about is this staff hasn't improved week to week under Mac Brown. They don't learn from situations from earlier in the year when they show up later in the year. And so you've had a bye week to, reanalyze everything that you do. If this game's close, I think Carolina attacks the game differently than they did a few weeks ago when they lost at home to the Yellow Jackets.
All right. The only thing that we will talk about defensively, because you could say, well, here's the thing. They had a bye week. Maybe this is the point where they turn around. I know that Jeff Collins said that they basically went back to the basics or whatever. Maybe there are people that think that this team comes out, looks the way that they did against Minnesota. I don't see it happening. The only thing that I think is worth talking about that maybe could make a difference defensively is a fully healthy Kamen Rucker, or as close to a fully healthy Kamen Rucker as we've gotten since the first week of the season. If he is fully healthy, how big of a difference can that honestly make for this Carolina defense? Because remember, last year, this defense wasn't good by any stretch. He was the one shining light, and he was a guy that got pressure and made things happen. Now, he wore down as the season went along. You don't have to worry about that this year. So maybe he can be that guy in the second half for you that gets a little bit of pressure, takes some of the onus off of a secondary that right now is really struggling, and hell, maybe helps you contain the run just a little bit better, even if he's not the greatest run defender.
Yeah, we know how much it means for Kamen Rucker he came back for a reason, and I think he wants to go out and not be remembered as a guy that didn't really accomplish anything. I think your hope is that he plays these last 5 games like his hair's on fire, and there's a reckless abandon that just leads to him disrupting play after play after play, which he's capable of because his body isn't as worn down this time of the year as it was last year. It sucks that it's because of injury and not because Carolina was able to rest him because they were blowing people out. But nonetheless, his body isn't as worn down right now as it's been in years past. I think a healthy Kamen Rucker gives you a pulse defensively, right? Like it gives you something to believe in and point to, because what Jahvaree Ritzie start to the season was fugazi. It wasn't real. Yeah. Des Evans, it's been 5 years of the same thing where it's been a lot of talk, not a lot of production. And I think more than anything, if you compare Kamen Rucker with what Travis Shaw has done, because Travis Shaw is having one of those years that he's playing really good individual football, but it's being overlooked by X, Y, and Z defensively, then it gives this defensive line at least 2 guys that can really impact the game. And when you have that, it's better than what we've had in years past. So, I don't know what to expect in terms of production from Kamen Rucker, but I think this will be a guy that'll be motivated to play at a high level knowing he only has potentially 5 games left in the Tar Heel uniform. And if you can get what you've got from Travis Shaw the last month or so before the bye week, we should see substantial improvement in Carolina's defensive line efforts from what we've seen so far this season.
I think what you said is perfect. It gives
Thank you.
hope. It gives you a chance, something to hang your hat on, that maybe this team finds a way to be even slightly better. Because if they find a way to be slightly better defensively, they can win some games. If they were slightly better defensively, they could have beat Pitt. If they were slightly better defensively, they could have beat Georgia Tech. Like, those wins were there for you. So maybe Kamen Rucker can make that much of a difference, especially as a pass rusher. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. If you're going off of what he did last year, yeah, that is going to happen. But, we have no idea if that actually translates to this year. But I think I find it hard to believe that he's not going to have some sort of impact, especially in a game like this with a team that is going to want to drop back and throw it a pretty decent amount of times. I think, you commented on Des Evans. I do think this is the best year that he's had. I mean, you look at the numbers, they're certainly better. He's getting more pressure. I think it's there, but he struggles to finish plays. That's something that he's done his entire career, but at least now he's starting to get pressure. Him and Travis Shaw are the only other 2 guys that I think are doing anything. And with Travis Shaw, the thing that sucks is it's limited to run plays. He's the one guy that's winning on rundowns. But the problem is nobody else is. And so the running back can pretty much go anywhere else that he isn't, and it's working for big gains. So I think that there are guys, that's the one group where I look at them and I say, okay, there's some decent players here that I think give you a chance to succeed. Now the question is can the rest of the defense sort of rally around them? Because the linebacking core is a complete disappointment. I know those guys, you can look at them, they're tackling well, whatever. Doesn't matter. They're not in the right gaps. They're always out of position. Like, it simply can't happen. And don't even get me started on the secondary. I want to see different guys play. It's not going to happen. I'll pound the table every time we're on here. Do not play Stick Lane and Jakeem Harris. Play DeAndre Boykins, Will Hardy. I don't care if you play the true freshman. It can't be worse than this group that's out there right now. These guys are terrible, and they have been this entire season. A week off is not saving this team, and especially that group. So you need to start seeing what some of these other guys have. And I think defensively, you're going to get to the point pretty quickly where with that side of the ball, you need to figure out who is going to be here moving forward that can actually help us to improve this defense and who needs to go. That's the point that you're going to reach pretty quickly with this defense, because right now they're not helping you in any way. Just find a way to make a stop or two, preferably late in the game, and we'll figure out the rest at the end of the season. I think that's kind of where you're at with this defense. Let's get to our keys to the game for this matchup with the Virginia Cavaliers. The first one, man, it's been a while since we brought this one out, but it's score, and score some more. We said this religiously the last 2 years on the podcast, and I haven't gone to it this year because I still, I guess, stupidly was holding out some hope that maybe this defense would dig down deep and find something that they had early in the season. This defense, guys, Carolina got another lemon. Jeff Collins is not helping this defense. This group is a liability at this point, so it means that your offense is right back to where it's been for the entirety of Mac Brown, the majority of Larry Fedora, where you have to score a ton of points to be able to win this game. That's why we talked about how important it is to capitalize in the red zone. If Carolina wants to win this game against a team, mind you, that's only averaging 28 points per game, but because of how efficiently they move the football, you would think they'll find the end zone a little bit more in this one. Carolina has to be able to put up a big number on the scoreboard or else they will not win.
Yeah, I mean, they're averaging 28. You got to expect them to score more than that against your defense. I said 35 points is probably the baseline you got to get to win. Maybe 31 gets the job done, but you're on the road against an efficient offense that can move the football. You probably need to get closer to 35 to have a chance. And so that means Carolina's got to be aggressive yet calculated. They've got to go get points, but not put their defense at a disadvantage. It's basically the same headache formula we've dealt with the last couple of years, and I think Chip Lindsey's been a lot more deliberate than Phil Longo ever was. Like Phil Longo got to the point where he didn't care. Like Phil was going to put up his points, he was going to put up his yards. That way, at the end of the year, he could say, "Not my fault, not my problem. We did our job. X, Y, and Z defensively did not do theirs." I think Chip Lindsey has tried to be a little bit more team oriented and tried to give his defense a breather every now and again, and try to play more complementary football. The results have been the more of the same. And so expect Carolina to want to run the ball to try to shorten the game, but they've got to be effective. Once you get across the 50 and you get inside the 40-yard line, unless it's just obvious kicking situations, Carolina's probably going to go for it. And they're probably going to play aggressively and try to get touchdowns in this game because field goals won't get the job done. So expect this offense to be as aggressive as they've been all year long because they know, once again, they've got to put up points and a lot of them to give their team a chance.
Second key to this game is pressure Calandria to create turnovers. Now, you may be saying to yourself, wasn't this a key the last game that Carolina played against Georgia Tech a couple of weeks ago? Oh, yeah, it was. And Carolina did not do a good job of it. But ultimately, when you've got a guy like Calandria who has proven to you before that he will turn the football over, he's a guy that gets a little bit wild at certain times. You have to be able to create those turnovers. Carolina has 2 interceptions the whole year, and it's from one guy. Both of them are from Caleb Cost. So you've got to have somebody else step up, but it starts up front. You have to get in the face of Calandria in this game, and you've got to be smart about how you do it. We saw Carolina try to get after Haynes King, but everything's downhill. Everything's getting pushed outside to create lanes for Haynes King to be able to escape. You've got to be smarter about how you contain Calandria in the pocket and force him to make some of those high-caliber throws. He's shown you at times this year that he can, but we've seen in the past that he does have moments where he turns the football over. I think that's a big key for Carolina in this game because, again, I don't see any way that they're just going to be able to stop Virginia, on 3 downs that consistently.
Yeah, it comes down to gap integrity and playing your lane, and hope that you're funneling him back to the middle of the field where there's a number of guys waiting to put him in on the ground. We talked about it at the onset where this is a guy that, with this offensive line, there is a scenario where Carolina's defensive line impacts the game in the way that we really haven't seen them since the first 3 games of the year when this team was 3-0. I think you combine Kamen Rucker with, yes, Travis Shaw's been an impactful defender in the run game, but you combine him with what Shaw can give you, with what Des Evans can do in terms of just putting some sort of pressure on the quarterback. And maybe you see the Jahvaree Ritzie from the beginning of the year show back up in a big way. And hopefully Carolina's going to do a much better job containing the quarterback because this guy is mobile. And at this point, teams are going to look at film and look at what Georgia Tech did, what Duke did, what whoever did with their quarterback to try to move the ball on you. And it's up to this coaching staff to adjust to it, put the players in a position to make better plays. Because if Calandria goes off and puts up, 225 passing and 75 yards rushing, then Virginia's probably having the offensive game that we're talking about that led to the first key to the game, which was score, and score some more.
Yeah, and look, Carolina has not been good about slowing down Virginia quarterbacks. We saw Brennan Armstrong throw for a ton of yards a few years ago when Carolina played them and found a way to get out with a win. You also had Bryce Perkins throw for a ton of yards when he was back there. So Carolina has not been great. at keeping these quarterbacks from Virginia in check, but it's a key to this game. Last key is one that I think will probably carry on for the majority of the season. And it doesn't matter what type of defense you're facing. This is a defense that hasn't gotten a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks, hasn't sacked a lot of opposing quarterbacks. You've got to win on first and second down, because if you get into those obvious third and long situations where you know that Carolina is going to have to pass, the pressure is going to come in the face of Jacoby Criswell. And when they're sending 6 or 7, there ain't no way to block that. Unless you're keeping a tight end in and then you're having limited receiving options, you do not have the numbers to contain that. And that's what every opponent since James Madison has done. They've said, let's see if Criswell can handle the blitz. And he can't. Nobody really can. We've seen it, with the last 2 quarterbacks as well. Once those offensive lines started to fall apart, and I mean, with Drake, it became the offensive line falls apart and you just blitz them. So it was a complete mess. Carolina's quarterbacks are rendered ineffective. That means that the first and second down play calls from Chip Lindsey are incredibly important. He has had some odd moments so far this year with some of his play calling. This needs to be one of the better game plans that you bring to the table. And it's also on the offensive line, especially in the run game, to be able to win up front on those first 2 downs, to at least create those third and short opportunities against the defense for Virginia that hasn't been great against opposing teams when they've been in third down situations.
Yeah, no, the best way to stay ahead of the chains is to give the ball to Omarion Hampton and run the football. Yes, you can't always run it on first down. You become predictable, but that's the best. That's Carolina's best player. That's usually when he touches the ball, something good is going to happen, something positive is going to happen. And so you're right. If Carolina is in a situation where they live in 3rd and 6 and longer, let's say 6+ of their third down opportunities, I don't know if this offense will do enough to keep up, because Virginia will just simply start sending 6 or 7 guys at him. He'll either A, get sacked, B, throw an incompletion, C, there will be a holding penalty, D, there will be a turnover. None of those are positive outcomes. And that's just the reality of the situation. We've seen it happen with him. We saw it happen with Drake. We saw it happen with Sam. So, Chip Lindsey's got to be aggressive, but the right kind of aggressive with what you're doing on first down. That way you stay ahead of the chains. And also a big part of this too is eliminating penalties, whether it's a false start, a holding, a ineligible receiver downfield, because it feels we have one of those every single week. Like, those are the things that in the moment, hurt you, but you don't really think about it. But when you look about how these penalties are altering drives, it's why they're not putting up the kind of points they got to put up every week to give themselves a chance. So that one ties in with score, and score some more. If Carolina stays ahead of the chains, I think they'll move the ball up and down the field and score. If they don't, I think they'll be inconsistent in that category, and most likely not have enough points on the board in the fourth quarter to give themselves a chance to win.
All right, let's get to our predictions for this game. Carolina, Virginia, 12 o'clock. It's a beautiful, beautiful CW game. What do you have happening?
Yeah, we talked on the onset about how much this game means to us. We value the rivalry. Locally on the radio side of things, I've pissed off a lot of Virginia people with some comments I made after Tony Bennett decided to retire 3 weeks before the season.
That's okay. I got him again today, so yeah, it's all good.
This one's a little bit more personal than it already is. I'd love to go into Scott Stadium and win and be able to get back to 500 and feel confident about Carolina's chances to make a bowl game. I really would. I don't think it's happening. I think Virginia's better. I think they're better coached. I think they're tougher. This game is very important for them and them trying to have the type of season they want to have as well. I think Carolina competes. I think Carolina is there in the fourth quarter. I think the Heels come up short. I think they lose this one 38-28 tomorrow afternoon in Scott Stadium.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is a game that Carolina probably wants pretty badly, especially after the passing of Tylee Kraft. This is the first game since they found out about it. He, of course, passed on the morning of the Georgia Tech game, but they didn't know about it until after the game. So this game's going to mean a lot to these guys. I think you'll see them come out, play with some emotion, but I think it's going to be similar to a lot of the games that we've seen here the last few weeks. Especially, I mean, Pittsburgh and Georgia Tech were almost a carbon copy of each other. Now, because you had the injury to Haynes King, it allowed you to get back in the game because Georgia Tech's offense went silent. I don't see that happening in this game. I think it'll be a lot like the Pittsburgh game where you'll feel like Carolina's there. They'll hang around and never really, allow Virginia to put the game away. But I think Virginia's offense is too good. You're right. They have a lot to fight for, too. I mean, you look at their schedule, there aren't a ton of guaranteed wins either. I think there's a good chance that they feel like this is a game that's incredibly important and a must-have. So I feel like the intensity will probably be there for them in a sleepy environment where, it doesn't matter how good they are. No one's ever showing up to their games. I still think Virginia pulls out the victory. I think Carolina's offense is productive, but I think they fall short 45-35 on the road in Charlottesville. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, there's an article that was written. Now, this comes on the heels of an appearance by Pete Thamel on the College Game Day podcast. And so On3 Sports wrote an article about this. Pete Thamel was being asked about the Florida Gators job that many people at this point believe will come open at the end of the year. I don't know how much of a guarantee it is because I think Florida has fought this year and there's at least a chance that they scrap and find their way into a bowl game. But it seems like that's one of the jobs that you look at right now and think, okay, probably a better chance that it's open than that it's not at the end of the year. Well, when talking about that, out of the blue, Pete Thamel brings up Carolina. And he says, quote, people want that Carolina job, by the way. I almost think coaches want the Carolina job more than the Florida job. Reese Davis then said, yeah, there's a lot of upside there. So when you hear that, and look, I don't know if Carolina is really a better job than Florida. I think when you look at Florida, the NIL money is clearly much better there. But I think the path to the playoff is much easier in the ACC. And I do think that there is probably an appetite to go to Carolina because, I mean, look, I think Chapel Hill is probably a little bit of a better place than Gainesville. Not that Gainesville isn't beautiful, but the thing also is that you look at these two jobs. One, I don't really know how much expectation Carolina has going forward. Like, I don't know where Tar Heel fans are really at. If Mac Brown can't bring this team to the place that he was talking about possibly bringing them with a New Year's Six bowl game again, and possibly even the expanded playoff, then I don't really know who is. And I think that's the mindset of a lot of Tar Heel fans. Florida, it is an incredibly pressure-packed job. They demand that you get to the college football playoff, especially with an expanded field. And they've tasted success before. They've had a lot of success in their program's history. So when you hear this coming from Pete Thamel, what do you make of his comments about how attractive the job is, especially with everything that's going on right now and how bad Carolina has looked at times throughout, the end of the last 2 years and then, of course, this season?
Yeah, look, I'll answer your question. This job's not a better job than the Florida job. Florida is a place where you can legitimately win a national championship. You've got endless funds, resources, and a fertile recruiting ground literally in your backyard. You could build a championship roster in your state. It's not shocking to hear this job be talked about in a positive manner because, I mean, people look at North Carolina as basically, I guess, to the south, what
Don't
Oregon.
say the words that you want to say.
It could be to the south what Oregon is in the Pacific Northwest, a program that competes on a annual basis because you do have. I mean, the thing is Mac Brown whenever he walks away, will have upgraded the facilities. Carolina's got a state of the art locker room. They got one of the better indoor practice facilities in all of college football. You're in a recruiting area where you can build a winner. Yes, in your state, North Carolina, but I mean, there's a lot of talent in Virginia, Georgia, and down into Florida. So I'm not shocked to hear this job be talked about positively. I'm done getting my hopes up that it's going to A, draw a big name, and then B, get a big name that delivers, because quite literally in my lifetime, it has not happened. And in terms of the type of success that I think it's possible for Carolina to be a top 15 to 20 program year in, year out. Like, that is an attainable goal. Like, that's something that should be something that this athletic department aspires to be, despite us not being a football first university. Like, you can be a basketball first university, but also be top 15 to 20 good in football on a year in, year out basis. So, but I don't expect that moving forward. I think it's going to be interesting to see how many people throw their name in the hat for the gig when the gig officially comes open. But I'm not sitting here expecting a big time coaching candidate to outwardly want the job in a way that Frank Beamer wanted the job when Mac Brown left the first time 20-something years ago.
Well, no, I don't think, and to be clear, I don't think that's what Pete Thamel's saying. I would be stunned if he's saying that there is actually a huge name out there that is that interested in the job. The only way that that's possible is if Mac Brown has talked to someone that he knows in the coaching ranks and has said, look, this is a job that you should want to take. Him convincing them would probably be the only way that you would see someone of that significance, like Frank Beamer back then, take this job. But what I do think is comforting is that you have one of the top reporters in college football that's telling you this job is incredibly attractive, because you look at the other jobs that could possibly come open. First of all, there are not going to be a lot of other big-time jobs that are going to be open. I don't, like, outside of Florida, what are the other ones that really stick out? I don't even see a job at this point like Arkansas coming open. That was another spot in the SEC that we thought could be available at the end of the season. I don't think that's coming open. I think what Sam Pittman has done there this year is really, really good. Maybe Oklahoma. That would probably be the only other school that I'd look at in the SEC of significance that comes open. I guess Auburn could potentially with Hugh Freeze rather. So I mean, but even with those jobs, I mean, Oklahoma, I think you've seen just about everybody else come in there and have success. Man, Auburn, there are not a lot of guys that have been able to have success since Gus Malzahn was there. That's the thing that I think is probably concerning for them. So, I mean, I don't know, man. I think this is a job that's really going to stack up well with a lot around the country. And you said that eventually maybe it could grow to be like Oregon. I think that might be asking a little too much. Like, Oregon's a place you can win a national title. This could be the year that actually ends up happening. I would look at it as, and maybe it's insane because this team just went to the college football playoff championship game last year. A team like Washington, I think, probably is what Carolina would want to be. Every once in a while, every decade and a half or so, Carolina finds a way to put together a special season. They're in contention to win something big. That would be what I would look at them as. But outside of that, they're a really solid program. That's where you would ultimately want to get to. So I'm comforted by this because this means that maybe Carolina doesn't have to settle for, a big name coordinator. Even I think there are people that are even questioning if Carolina can land that at this point, or just a retread that is on his third or fourth school. I think hearing this makes you think, okay, there are going to be at least some decent names that could be interested in this job moving forward. So we'll keep an eye on that. Of course, first of all, in order for that to happen, Mac Brown would have to leave at the end of the season, and that's not a guarantee just yet. But what is a guarantee is we'll have you covered on the website, HeelToughBlog.com, for the rest of this season. We'll have a recap of the game that will be going up tomorrow, hopefully somewhat close to the end of the game. I do have to work tomorrow, as I was telling you guys last night. So if it's not up, tomorrow night, it will be up on Sunday. But I'm expecting that I will be able to get it done and get it out to you guys. Hopefully it'll be a happy one. That would make things certainly a lot easier. The preview, forgot that that's not up just yet, although that will be out shortly after the podcast concludes here. That'll have everything that you need to know, including the latest injury report. So make sure that you guys are checking in on that. More in-depth information about Virginia that could be very valuable to you guys as you study the opponent ahead of tomorrow's game. And then, of course, any other news that's going on around Tar Heel football, we've had you covered with everything that's going on the recruiting trail. Carolina losing 2 2025 commits. So make sure that you go back, read those and the impacts that those guys' departures will have on Carolina's 2025 class. And then also keep an eye on the basketball side of things, all our coverage that we've got with the basketball team. Sunday, Carolina plays their exhibition against Johnson C. Smith. And then after that, it's time to go. Carolina gets their season started against Elon. That'll be a huge one. And from that point on, we'll have you covered all season long. Josh will have you covered with everything on the website side of things. He'll be writing previews, recaps. I'll jump in there occasionally to help him out, especially when the team's over in Maui, because he's now working the morning show and I'm working the midday show. So we will, coordinate on that stuff throughout the year. But of course, both of us also on the Four Corners podcast, where you can check us out there, wherever you get your podcast. Same thing for the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Those are the best ways to listen to the podcast, especially if you are in the car. We're encouraging you to do that. So that's going to wrap it up for tonight's edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.